Good evening. Tonight we have 3 issues that I wish to touch on. First, let me tell you a little something about the trip. But even before that, let's take 3, 4, 5 minutes just to gather ourselves. Not a meditation, just to gather ourselves, gather the strength, gather the purpose, take careful aim. Because everything has to be performed, viewed with intent, purpose. So with a trip. In other words, if you say you went to the beach Saturday, what was the intent? How focused were you? What did you do? Did your plan come through? Why did it, or why didn't it? Already, that's room for thought, because I know that people don't operate that way. Ask him if Joan came and to leave the door open for her. People don't operate that way. I don't know why, but basically they don't. Going to the beach means going to the beach.
How long do you want someone to stay down there?
Let us stay another 5 minutes. So by no means did I view this trip to Ecuador as a vacation. Basically, I don't believe in vacations. Sue had gone down there. She had purchased an apartment. The apartment still wasn't completely furnished, 90% furnished. It had to be completed. Things had to be done. I said I would go down and help her do this. In my particular mind, Ecuador, I don't know, could be a little place in Africa someplace. I've heard of it, but never entered my mind to think about it. We went down. First thing, I was very, very pleasantly surprised. Sue did a beautiful job of furnishing this apartment. Absolutely beautiful. The apartment itself is beautiful. The building, terrific. It was like Battery Park had come back to life, if you know what I mean. Scenery, one view, another view, another view, and all along the three views, the Andes Mountains. And let me tell you, they are very high and very majestic. It occurred to me that if someone were just to sit there and look at the Andes Mountains and try to identify with them. Oops, did I say a bad word? That a lot would happen. I did. I sat there every day and I looked at them and I tried to devour them, put them inside, and put them here someplace. Apartment done. Places like Ecuador are si mañana. So fortunately, the part of the bathroom stall got finished the day before we came home. Pretty close. I don't know if they ever came for the second coat on the spot, but like that. So you spend a lot of time waiting for people to show. That can be improved on. Others can do it. Okay. The idea of returning to my native language, I liked a lot. I haven't done it in many, many years, maybe 60 years. I have not spoken Spanish with people. I have not known any Latin and Spanish speakers. I have not known any. So that got done. As you can see, that was an aim with a purpose. That was business. The business of preparing an apartment so that it can be rented. The rules in a foreign country are you cannot go back and forth as much as you want, maybe once a year or twice a year, I forget. We had to incorporate and get me work permit so I can go in and out of Ecuador anytime I want. That means sizable amount of effort, meetings, to form a corporation that can do that for me, install me as an officer in that corporation, lawyer time, done. So the apartment is taken care of, the business is taken care of. The language, how did that get done so readily? Before I got there, Susan had already spoken to people about her partner being me, who is a metaphysical lecturer. Ooh, I didn't think of that, but she did. A metaphysical lecturer. Well, that was very impressive, and before I opened my mouth or got there were people waiting to hear what I was about. Okay. I was there just a little bit, and the owner of the gallery that seems to be a hub of activity asked me to speak. First thing that came to my mind, you can understand, no. No. Whatever you ask me, my first answer is no. That's for sure. But fortunately, one of my wise guides stepped in at that moment and said, "Tell her yes." Okay. I said yes. She said, "Oh, and it must be in Spanish." I was about to say, "I don't need this." Tell her yes. Yes, I certainly will, and thank you. So I had maybe 4 days to get myself into gear to do this. As I said, I have not spoken Spanish with people since I was 12, 13 years old with my parents. Okay? Time came. Was that the same night that they did the speech with the Mexicans, or was that the night before?
You mean the revolution, the
Yes.
Masons?
Yes.
No, that was a different night.
That was different.
Yeah, we had seen the Masons, and it was after that that you did your talk, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I work on my talk. I read Ouspensky out loud for 3 days. I'm kind of ready. Not really ready, but I'll take a chance. Before the evening that I present, back at the gallery, and I understand that there's to be a talk on the Mexican Revolution. A few gentlemen are there, maybe 6 or 7. I notice that they are very well dressed. Each one has a suit, somebody has a sport coat, they all have ties. And let's see what they're going to do. They introduce themselves. It's going to be a talk about the Mexican Revolution. So the first one gets up, gives his name, and proceeds a very, very intelligent presentation. Not a little rap, a presentation upon one aspect of the Mexican Revolution. At times, had to reach for notes. All right. He's finished, receives his applause. Another gentleman gets up and speaks about the Mexican Revolution. By the time the 6 of them had spoken, maybe an hour had passed. And I'm saying these people, these men, came here very, very well prepared, well read on the subject, with notes in their pocket in case they got a little lost. And they did a word you're going to hear a lot more of. They did a professional job. Oh, very nice. In a little while, I find they are Masons. I don't know how many days later, 1, 2 or so, gave my presentation. Admittedly, knowing they were very, very good, but I think I'm better. I'm going to do a better job, a better presentation. And I believe I did. In Spanish, well received. Something inside me as I'm going said, well, I could be getting lost, some ideas are not right, but this is happening. I am saying what I'm saying as if it were Shakespeare on Broadway. This is no joke. I'm representing the fourth way. Okay. All well, all well, all well. Gentleman sitting there. I mentioned different aspects. I mentioned the Gnostic Gospels. He said, yes, yes. I mentioned Allan Kardec, Spiritism. Yes. When I finish, he embraces me. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. He's one of the Masons that wasn't there before. He came down to see me. Okay. That means I must take care of this. A door has opened a little bit. I must take care of that, or else an opportunity will just disappear. Now that I've got this head start, now people say, oh, you're Gilbert Barretto, you're the metaphysical lecturer? Yes, I am. And what kind of metaphysics do you deal with? I deal with the fourth way of spiritual education. Don't mention Gurdjieff. And so forth. Eventually I start. I do promise the people at the presentation, I will return. If David Fowler were here, I know he would smile and his eyes would open up a little bit, because that's a little bit of a private joke we have. My tremendous admiration for General Douglas MacArthur, who said to the Philippine people, I will return. And he did. Years had passed, wars had been over, he had aged, and on that particular day, he was aboard a USS aircraft carrier. And he said to the captain of the carrier, I want the deck cleared. And it was cleared. And alone on the deck of a USS aircraft carrier, General Douglas MacArthur said he felt the tears coming down his cheek because he promised that he would return. And he did return. So I told these people, I will be back in December. I will return. And I'm going to do that. If I'm alive, I will. I have enough material and people around me to begin a group in Spanish and to begin a group in English. The Spanish speakers don't speak too much English. English speakers don't speak too much Spanish. But I will do that because, yes, I had a wonderful time, but you're seeing that between the apartment, the presentation, the group. This is business. So I think I may have spoken to one or two gentlemen here yesterday, and I said, as I've said to people so many times, when you say hello to me, you're looking well, boom, out comes the vacuum cleaner, because that's what I do anywhere I am, all times, all places. That is my gig. So I do it. That was part of it, yeah. Felt good to do it. Felt good to work in Spanish. Felt good to stand up and do my own thing for myself, because I know that I'm going to do it. And when I've depended upon others, it didn't happen. That's that. Meet a man I'm very, very, very impressed with. I am a mountain boy. Is this guy high on a mountain? Place is fantastic and beautiful, all built by himself, created by his wife. Jungle type trees around. And I spoke to him a few minutes and I knew. Bam. Yeah, I've met somebody that's going to be in my life. I read his website on the websites, pages of his accomplishments. Pages. So, now 2 more thoughts. I wish to invest more into Ecuador, looking at 2 more places. Land with a house to be built, another apartment. That was Ecuador. I enjoyed myself, some terrific dinners, wonderful. But I don't do vacations. Oh. Next round comes up in December. Maybe I'll have to take a few weeks off before that. Go down to see how things are doing. I don't want to let this thing slide. Those 2 groups are important to me. I may add, I have no intentions of one-to-ones down here. I want these to be 2 reading groups. And I simply want to make political connections. Social and political connections. I am not a nice old man who's lonely and wants to have some people around to perk him up a little bit. I want social and political connections, and I will get them. And then maybe I toss a card in the air. I think I'll become a Mason in South America. My grandfather was a Mason. My uncle was a Mason. So that's pretty much my trip. I did that. So far, let me have some feedback. Because I gotta have people talk back to me. I will not put up with talking to a dead room. Sir, speak to me.
Please forgive me as the thoughts are just now beginning to come on what you said. It was a great experience watching you talk about and light up about the prospective groups.
Why was it a great experience?
For me, it was a great experience.
Why?
Just watching you, because you shifted
Talk.
this, your light completely shifted, it expanded when you were talking about that. It seemed like your inner body is definitely more intense when you're talking about these ideas and these projects means. So it looks very truthful.
You being honest?
Yeah, I heard that they explain what happens to a person who speaks the truth all the time. What is the consequence of that state of mind and behavior? Is that all his projects come true, and that was the only thing that was coming to my mind while you were speaking, because you were teaching me that from the beginning.
Yes, from the beginning. Both here and there. I notice how quickly people speak. because they speak very quickly on television because you've got to get 100 ideas into 1 second with people. That's why you can't understand people. But when I speak and I tell you about Ouspensky, te digo la palabra de un señor que nos explica que la evolución de un hombre no es definitiva, es una posibilidad. Puede ser que una bestia tenga evolución natural, pero un hombre tiene una evolución del alma y de la mente. You bet you're swinging A. Yeah.
Well, about the revolution of the heart and the mind. That's a good way to put it.
Well, you have plunged me into another aspect of what I'm talking about. Revolution of heart and mind. Revolution of heart and mind is a very good idea. There are other revolutions. I'm sorry that David is not here tonight, because I know I could count on him for a little backup.
He's sick.
Hmm?
He's sick. He's under the weather.
Under the weather, he should be on top of the weather.
Yeah.
All right. Your driver's license. Have you noticed that your name is all in capital letters?
Yeah, on all the official documents, everything is in capital letters, first and last name. Yes, we're non-personal entities, basically.
Who knows about this here? Who has thought about this here? You, I know.
Yeah.
The website I speak of is, however you get into it, look in under name in capital letters. Because your name in capital letters does not mean that you are a human being. You're an entity in league with the state. Long reading. Not to be done in 5 minutes, guys, because I'm going to be there. I'm heading back to there. I'm going to it very much. It's essential that a group of thinkers learn how to deal with governments, with phases of government, and with court trials. Because the moment that they say, Albert B. Tom, please, you say yes, you sank. You have admitted that you are a non-person in a court of law. You are a title. That's your title, not your person. Now you can be dealt with and treated as a non-entity. That is a time when you must say, Albert Piton, if I can have that statement written as a statement that I'm a person, I will proceed further, not before. Susan, you know more about this. Talk about it.
I was introduced to this idea last year by my friend Jack, who we spent some time with him and his wife down in Ecuador. And he, for a few years, researched the idea of sovereignty, which has to do with separating one's person from the legal entity, which is how you are dealt with by any official organization. And I don't remember the exact circumstances of why he was brought to trial, but he was trying to contest something. And in the courtroom he said he basically refused to respond to the judge's questions, and he said, if there is anyone here who has a claim against me, please make it known. And because he wouldn't follow the rules of the courtroom, it became complete pandemonium, and he walked out. He went to a friend's house, stayed there for a couple days, and then he was tracked down and arrested and thrown in jail. And they said, unless you will recant this, unless you will admit that you are this person in capital letters, then you're going to stay in jail. He stayed in jail for 8 months. And finally he decided it wasn't worth it. So he signed something and they let him go. But he was explaining to us that this is a very, very well researched field of law, and I was completely ignorant of it. I don't think you were all that cognizant
Never
of
occurred
it.
to me.
And to realize that this was even an issue, it was astonishing. And to realize that we are all being controlled in this way by the government was shocking to me. And yet, if you want to go up against the system and you want to buck the system and protest it in some way, you're really asking for, you're really jumping into a big can of worms, because it's like saying, just because the light is red, why should I stop? You know, it's just a series of agreements that people have gone along with, and now everyone has kind of bought into the system, and now they're being controlled by it. And I don't think I have enough technical knowledge of the subject to really go any further, but I definitely urge everyone to research it more, because I think it's a very important issue, whether or not one decides to engage in a battle over it. That's irrelevant. I think what's relevant is to realize that you're in this situation, so that if you do find yourself having to engage at some point, at least you realize the position that you're in.
I don't think I understand what situation you're describing.
If you're any legal document, anything legal at all, a contract, a license, a permit,
All bills.
a bill, anything, when you see that your name is in capital letters, that means that you are a legal entity rather than a person. It's like you're kind of a corporation instead of a human being. And that gives the state the right to control you.
The right to hold you to your obligations and agreements and contracts.
The right to control you.
This is going to require a lot of research, a lot of reading. It's not one paragraph, it is volumes on the internet, because when your name is spelled out in capitals, you are not an entity. You are part of a legal statute.
Your constitutional rights cease
Yes.
to exist?
Yes, exactly.
I think one could go to the Center for Constitutional Rights.
And find out about it.
Yeah, there's,
I'm asking people to look up on your own, keep looking, because you will run into it, I believe, these days more than ever before. I don't know how versed people are in this one. I know James does. How much news do you watch per day? I watch maybe 3, 4, or 5 hours worth of news a day. What's happening in Wisconsin, the governor writes, this whole thing is not just an incident. This is a movement, and maybe some of us will be part of this movement. I expect to be part of this movement, both here and in South America. Okay. Don't drop that one. Remembering, among other things, that my birth certificate is not in capitals, because I beat it by 4 years. My birth certificate is in 1929, and this didn't start to happen until 1933. So, let me see. What do people think of that idea? Come on. Talk.
Well, what would be the counterpoint to that? Let's say this, it means what it means. So what would be the alternative?
I don't know. I'm not that versed in it, but I have to become. I don't know. All I know is that it's essential, because starting with the idea that your parent has to send the government money to get a birth certificate, but it is not a birth certificate, because that can only be granted by a church. It is a document that says that you are part of the government. Very involved, way past me. I'll have to tell you, take me another year or two to work on it.
Another aspect of it is that if you're involved in a trial, when there's a recess and the judge and the lawyers retreat to another room and then they come back in, when they go into that other room, they can change the rules of the court without you knowing. And it has to do with a lot with admiralty law.
Yes.
And,
A second. The idea birth does not arise from giving birth as we know it. It's from birth in maritime law, B-E-R-T-H. You have birth, which is a space as a ship, too involved for me. But because of the way things are going, because of what has happened, especially in the last few weeks, whereas governors have the right to do almost anything they want in the state, things are getting very, very serious. This is, I assure you, it's not going to be Republicans and Democrats and a little vote. This is a movement. There are thousands of people already just a little short of taking up arms. When I was a little boy, it was hello there.
Hello.
Good. Just wanted to see if you were awake.
Yeah, revolution is very exciting to talk about. And
Don't get sexy. The idea that things are really very, very serious here politically and financially, and that it's a movement.
I have a question.
Yes.
How is that whole thing in Ecuador, say? Is it the same things going on there?
No.
No.
And I don't know enough about it there. There's very little sort of going on, because the Ecuadorian papers don't put out information daily. There is no Ecuadorian station that's pounding out information. No. I'm talking about here the fact that a good number of states are, this is very, very important. When I was a kid, a very important thing was to be a union member. So I joined the musicians union when I was about 16. And I was very, very proud of it, as almost every musician has been proud of being part of the musicians union. because you're not alone dealing with a nightclub owner. These conditions are almost in danger of being wiped out when the states and some governors have taken up the idea of destroying the union's capacity to have, what do they call it?
Collective bargaining.
Collective bargaining. Yes, thank you. So, a little asides in there. To add a little bit more aside, I see Duchamp's advertisement. How many students do you have more or less around you now?
Well, to these workshops that are open for public, come between 30 and 50 people at a time. And the students we teach every other weekend at the academy for this first year course, I have 14 students, and we lost one in the beginning. One dropped out, so there was 15. One dropped out. So 14 steady.
Do you recall that that's the first thing you told me when you started to work with me?
Yeah.
You have it. You have it because you wanted it.
Thank you.
That is the power of wanting something, not idly, but wanting something so it stays in your mind, as I said a couple of weeks ago, until it burns a hole in your mind. Then you'll have it. I say to people, oh, I sent you that guy, Luca.
Yes.
Nice kid, good. He was very impressed with you. I'm going to send him next to you. I want Johnny to jump in. I offered, and mind you, what I'm presenting now is nothing that you didn't hear for 2 years over and over and over again. I meet this young musician, Luca, meet him at a Christmas party, his father, his brother. I looked at him, and whatever it is that I do or that I have, I did it. And I looked at him. I said, wow, said to Sue, this guy reminds me of me. First of all, he's incredibly handsome. I was pretty handsome too. Maybe 28-inch waist, 27 in there. Tall, nice hair. And he's a musician. He's got a smile. Boom, I'm in love with this guy already. Okay. So a little while later, he walks over to me that same evening, and he says, "Look, he says, I've got to pick your brain. I got to talk to you." Okay. So apparently, he has something that he wants from me, and I have something with him. Okay, start to work. He goes out. He gets the books. He's reading. He's a musician at Berkeley. No, it's not Berkeley, is it? In Boston?
Berkeley?
Berkeley. So, I speak to him twice a month. Speak to my associate Duchamp. Calls Duchamp. Now next I want him to speak to Johnny. You will be next. The idea when somebody comes into the organization that I'm a part of, you have joined an organization. Remember I said to people, offer an organization. I don't want to do any more beginner students. Zip. Beginner students, starting with Johnny, send them to do something. I don't want to do that anymore. When somebody comes into this organization, yes, you're in music or entertainment, call Sue. Read her website, she'll give you as much knowledge as she can. The idea of business occurs to you. Is the businessman here? Speak to him, back and forth. Idea of psychology comes to you, boom. There's the man you speak to. You think you'd like to be a writer? Boom, speak to him. All these people are here to help you. They are now part of your team, and I'm part of your team. So I want this young guy who says, well, just how will I pay you? I don't know, a few dollars. When you're a star, if you ever are, you put me down in your pad for a big number of figures. That's how you pay me back. So with that in mind, that's how I want to start working with people. What do you think, Albert?
A few things on my mind. The first would be how lucky are these people that your destiny brought you, of all people, that never really goes anywhere, to them, and not for a day or two, and how destiny, and I'm sure that you get out of it more, or I don't know, and how everything is connected, and how important it is to realize, that everything that happens is an opportunity for something, for development of the soul, or it's like a game, it's like this is your path and you have to cross this path, and sometimes for this to happen, geez, she has to go to something and fall in love and sell an apartment and get some money, and somebody says Ecuador, and she says, yeah, why not? And this happens, the weirdest thing. But it happened. So I'm sure there is a lot of opportunities that will come for all of us as an organization, because we are not individuals, we are an organization. A community. And I think when you have an organization and a community, you can do much better than you can do on your own. It's always the case. That's what's on my mind.
Yeah. What he's saying, somebody crosses into our paths. I base everything upon my idea that there are no accidents. Everything has a purpose. So many groups and teachers and gurus and this and that, they're all doing whatever they do. Come to them, be their student, sit outside the cave, sit inside a cave. And I'm saying no. The work that I present is an organization of people. When you come into an organization like this, you have 10, 12, 14 teachers, all there to help you, like uncles and aunts and big brothers, to help you. That's our purpose. And in return, we only accept people who are willing to enter into these kind of terms. Because I don't believe that we are lonely people looking to have yet another person to talk to. I like your approach. Take a subject. I know you think that way. I don't think that way, but you think that way. Dushan has the ability to get into a subject and work on the subject. I don't have subjects. So whatever comes to my mind is flying around. Which brings us to area number 4. Tell everybody about your gig.
Shall I just start my gig?
No, don't start it right away. And whatever you do, I remember from the past, don't start with your grandfather.
I won't.
Because I'm not that young.
the preface to the gig. The associates, as some of you know, a bunch of us have been reading Madame Jean de Salzman's Reality of Being in our Tuesday night group. And we've been reading it pretty slowly, pretty much a page a meeting, or even less sometimes, and really dissecting it and talking about it, not unlike other meetings that we've had where we bring in a reading. But in this particular case, we're sticking with one book from the beginning to the end. Some of us, including myself, have already read the book, and I think, if I can speak for others, people have been pretty impressed by this book. I've been very impressed, and it seems to me it's something I'll probably read several times in the near future. So we started reading this and came across a couple passages a few weeks ago, and the word conditioning was in some of these passages, and it just hit me during this meeting that I had never really given this idea that much thought. Conditioning, I said, okay, I sort of know what it means, but I never really meditated on it, looked around, maybe at other readings, made connections, and I sort of came to the conclusion that I actually didn't really know what it meant, which was sort of humbling. Really know what it meant. I had maybe an idea. So I told this to Gil in our last meeting a few weeks ago, which happened to be just after the last Thursday meeting here, where we were talking about similar themes about, as Gil presented tonight, about people speaking more formally, giving presentations. And so Gil said, why don't you give a presentation on this subject? And so for the last 2 weeks, I had done some research and put some thought into the idea of conditioning and what conditioning means, and came prepared with the presentation.
Yeah. I saw this. It happened. I thought he should do it. For him, for all of us. We hear an idea, we see an idea for the 50th time, for the 500th time, and we know that, yeah. And we don't go into it deeper and more and deeper and more. As if our thought, remember Jim, we spoke on this, instead of being to go out and cover more area, to take one subject and go all the way into it. Because Dushan, in his advertisement for 3 subjects, that makes sense. The 3 subjects are
stability, clarity, and intensity. Stability, clarity, and intensity.
Okay. Stability. Let's work on stability for 2 weeks. You work with your students. Let's work with intensity. Let's take a subject and really, really work with it. Because if somebody says stability, oh yeah, I got it. No, they don't have it. It'll be a long time before they have it. So I said, this is something that Derek, I see him doing it. And I like this idea. I like it very, very much. So we can become more of an organization that does presentations to each other, preparing to do presentations outside to other organizations, to anybody that brings it up. Please, thank you. Yeah.
This will be in English, this presentation.
Don't be jealous. Don't be jealous.
Just a little bit. So as I said, the reality of being by Gene de Salzman is what really triggered this whole presentation coming into being. So I just want to first start with I just want to read a couple passages from her book that had this word and that some way form this idea that I don't know what conditioning really is. So this is from just a little subchapter. It's called Two Currents. What we are in our essence, our highest possibilities, we do not know. What we are in our person, the implacable conditioning that defines us, we also do not know. Just want to read that again. The implacable conditioning that defines us. Implacable, I actually admit I had to look up. It means immovable, very difficult to remove. She goes on. We identify with our person, ignorant of the relation that should exist between it and our essence. Yet inner development begins with the capacity to know myself, to understand myself. She goes on. This is under a subheading called A New Way of Functioning. The state of my being today is conditioned by my way of thinking, feeling, and sensing, which takes all of my attention and restricts me to a narrow part of myself. In order to go beyond this, there must appear in me a new way of functioning. I have to discover the total ineffectiveness, the insufficiency of my thoughts and feelings as a means to approach the true nature of myself. The automatic functioning of my thought and feeling comes between the world as it is, what I really am, and the perception I have of it. The state in which I live is without order, vision, or aim. I am here without knowing why or what I serve. This last little bit as an intro, it's similar to what we just read, but I think it's worth reading. Our existence depends on the state of being in which we live, in which our entire life is conditioned and directed by certain influences. We are subjugated, prisoners of a certain form of thinking, feeling, and acting. When we realize the limitations of the state, we feel the need for change. That last sentence, I think about that, and I know for a fact I have not understood the limitations of this person's thinking and feeling. So, I think that was part of what triggered this. I need to find out a little bit more about what conditioning is. And so I started, thinking about conditioning, what I thought conditioning meant. And what came to mind is an experience I want to share that I shared with a couple of associates, and which I thought of in the past in connection with conditioning. But I'm going to refer to it a few times, so I just want to talk about it now. And it's an experience I had when I was probably about 7 years old, and it was in elementary school. And the picture is a very large library that had a pretty strong affinity to. I picture browns and oranges, this kind of 70s colors that I still have a liking for. There's a big assembly. There's about 3 grades sitting down Indian style. I'm one of the kids. So there's about 100 elementary schoolers, and there's someone speaking that's not a teacher. He's an outside. I think he's some form of scientist. But he's standing at a podium, and he starts talking about different scientific ideas. And at some point, he asks if anyone knows how a magnet works, what attracts a magnet. And I'm sitting there, and in a possible moment, I know the answer. And no one else raised their hand. And again, 100 other kids. And he asked the question again. And I know it. I don't know how I might have seen it on a television show or been at a science center, but I know the answer. I raise my hand and tell him iron. Iron is what attracts a magnet. And he says he's actually pretty impressed, and I'm even more impressed because I know it and no one else knows this answer. And so I'm feeling pretty incredibly special. And later, I don't remember anything else in the lecture, but later he referred to me a couple times as Iron Man. He said, as Iron Man said, and he started talking about his magnet. And so, I think about that. And basically, he called me a superhero in front of the rest of the school, half the school. So, I think about that in relation to conditioning, and I know that's a specific instance and not a series of events, but I do believe that was something that was deeply impressed upon me, and I think I've always wanted to be the one singled out. I want to be special, and I found as I thought about it more in the past 2 weeks that this actually is part of my daily life, almost on an hourly basis, if not more frequently. This conditioning affects me. So then my first part of research, I went kind of back to just the beginning. What does conditioning mean? I went to Merriam-Webster's dictionary. What is conditioning? There's two main definitions. One is physical conditioning, the process of training to become physically fit by a regimen of exercise, diet, and rest. Also, the resulting state of physical fitness. Okay. The second one, I think more apt to this discussion, a simple form of learning involving the formation, strengthening, or weakening of an association between a stimulus and response. Again, I'll say it. A simple form of learning involving the formation, strengthening, or weakening, so one of the three, between a stimulus and a response. So it's one thing's here, and the conditioning is the relation between the two. Other definitions I found that were in psychological dictionaries, which I thought were interesting. Conditioning, a process of changing behavior by rewarding or punishing a subject each time an action is performed, until the subject associates the action with pleasure or distress. Again, it's similar to the other stimulus and response. We punish or reward for one or the other. And then the last definition of interest I came across was replaceable words or classical conditioning, Pavlovian conditioning, respondent conditioning, which I'm sure most of you know the Pavlovian studies. Definition is a process in which a stimulus that was previously neutral, as the sound of a bell, comes to evoke a particular response as salivation by being repeatedly paired with another stimulus that normally evokes the response as a taste of food. So, and then just to repeat the Pavlovian study, there's the bell, the food, and then the saliva. Bell, food, saliva, bell, food, saliva. And finally, the food is taken out, so there's just bell and saliva. So, after the dictionary encyclopedia, I went to see what other work-related writings have to say about this conditioning. And so I went to Gurdjieff, and he doesn't talk too much about specifically conditioning. He uses some other words, and one of which appears in Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. And he doesn't use the word conditioning, but he uses the word asciano, which I don't exactly know why he uses that word. There's many words in this book that I'm sure you've come across, if you have read, that are a little bit beyond reason. But anyway, about this asciano, which he also calls education for the being of a responsible being, he says it is humans' greatest misfortune, which strikes me as very important to remember, is their greatest misfortune, which we are subjected to from the very first days after separation from our mother's womb. He says it's due to the abnormalities of the beings of responsible age around us. He calls it a stubborn influence. He calls it maleficent, which is harmful. And he says that these beings that inflict this condition have invented it for their own use. He later says, in consequence of this conditioning, the possibilities for the free development of all that's required for engendering objective being reason are gradually atrophied as unfortunate, utterly blameless, newly arisen beings. That would be us. And finally disappear during the period of preparatory age. That's where Jeff speaks about it in the fourth way, Spensky's fourth way, which he is quoting for Jeff. Conditioning is described as other people's words, other people's views, and other people's theories that can form such a quick crust around essence that nothing can penetrate it to reach you, to what you are. And I went to other students who have written books, students of Jeff who the lineage have written books, and found a couple mentions of conditioning worth pointing out. Bennett's Jeff Making a New World. Man belongs to the highest class of living beings, but he is non-existent in the world of universal essences until he liberates himself from the conditioning of his animal existence. And then in the book Jeff by Needleman and Baker, three I think passages that of interest about conditioning. Reality certainly exists in itself, but we have no access to it, because all our conditioning and ways of representation interfere with our observations and modify the landscape at the same time that we imagine we are seeing it. Another passage. But consciousness hides behind a mask. It is the prisoner of human conditioning. In reality, our perception of this primal energy is veiled and obscured by the vast disorder of our functions. So I'm finding this, people that have obviously studied this a lot more than I have, find this conditioning is incredibly important and pretty much a prison to us advancing anywhere. Last passage from this book. Too much of our essence, our deep feelings, desires, and talents were invalidated and twisted in the course of conditioning us to conform to the consensus about what was normal. And another, I found a more recent, a little more easy to understand description of conditioning by a man named Jeff Myers, who has a pretty good blog, and he's a follower of the Fourth Way. He says, each of us has become conditioned by our parents' values, by the morals of a particular culture and time we're born into, by education, by government propaganda, by various religions, by philosophical beliefs. All of these things are conditioned. This conditioning is based primarily on cultural prejudice, fear, tradition, and incomplete or inaccurate information about man and his potential, the cosmos, and God. So it's a little, basically I'm getting to now is that conditioning is almost everything that I've come into contact with. And then I had also found some mentions from a metaphysical lecturer, G.J. Barretto. In select writings, I found this to be of interest. A couple passages. One is, W-I-N is the way we have learned to spell God. As a society, we are bred for competition, ill-prepared to function in a manner where the primary purpose would focus on contributing to the welfare of the community. Which I just want to point out that previously during the discussion, there was a lot of talk about community, and I often find myself being in this conditioning of competition, where I want to be the one to be singled out and not for the good of the community. It seems going against this idea. And then another passage from select writings of G.J. Barretto, and he calls organized belief systems the universal opiate. In order to learn that which I believe leads to the liberation of an individual, three elements are essential and must be present. The individual accepts the present direction of their lives is incapable of providing their needs. The person must realize that their present position is the result of a belief system which must change before there is a real change of direction. And that which has to be altered is the core belief of what is good and bad, right and wrong, pleasant and unpleasant, desirable and undesirable. A new broom, so to speak. So there, it's my, I believe what Mr. Gill is saying is that what we think of as good and bad, right and wrong, pleasant, unpleasant, desirable and undesirable is all condition, is all part of our condition. And lastly, one more reading from the select writings of G.J. Barretto. If you are in hell, it is your belief system that put you there and keeps you there. You will remain there where you are until you adopt a new set of beliefs. Aspiring to become liberated by adjusting a few attitudes is much like supposing that one becomes fashionable by merely purchasing a new pair of shoes. So at this point, after I come across a lot of the mentions of conditioning, I'm getting a little bit better idea of what it is, and to me, it seems like it's everything that I've picked up, everything I've been told, everything I've learned, the way I think, the way I feel, how my body moves even. And so I go back to Madame de Salzman. What she says is that we're conditioned on thinking, feeling, and she says sensing and sensing/acting. So I'm moving in senses as well. So I start thinking, okay, everything in this person is a product of conditioning, even down to the way I speak and the way I walk. And so, I come across this idea of walking. So I start to see if this is true. Is the way I walk a product of conditioning? I don't know, but I'll try to look into it. So I start walking. I watch myself walking. I'm walking at a certain pace, and I say, okay, let me try to walk exactly half as fast as I am walking now, and I do it. And it's very difficult, and soon enough, I find myself going back to my natural pace. This pace that's sort of an automatic, which I'm sure you've all done exercises that are very similar, where we do something that's not our habitual way of doing it. I understand that, but I never looked at the lens of conditioning before. I never thought, okay, did I watch my father walk? Did I watch my mother walk? Did I watch my best friend walk? Did I watch the guy who I thought was coolest in the 8th grade walk? How did I end up with this walk? It has to be conditioning, is what everyone's saying here. And this little bit of light seems like a lot to me. So, and I apologize for reading so much of these passages of the Salzman. I think they're just very, very excellent. So I go back to her. I find out that after looking through several books, work-related books, it seems by far de Salzman is using the word conditioning more than anyone, and really kind of touching upon it. So I sort of dive back in, and as I said, she breaks it down to thinking, feeling, and sensing/acting. So I'm going to pick up in a chapter that she calls a free thoughts. This is about a little bit about what she talks about, how our mind has been conditioned, and the repercussions of this. Am I convinced of my ignorance and of the uselessness of everything I believe I know? I may say so, but do not really feel it. I value my knowledge, and I always want to bring an answer or reach a conclusion. I am conditioned by this. Everything I know limits my perception and conditions my mind. All that I know is a mass of memories that impel me to accumulate, repeating the same kind of experiences. And there I just want to stop and say that during the previous discussion, talking about what Sue was presenting and Gail was presenting, what came to my mind was the government can't do this, they don't do this. Of course they don't do this, the Constitution is this and that, or my mind was going against this idea. It was jumping on, this can't be true, there's something not true, it doesn't make sense. And I suspect it's part of my conditioning. The way I think about governments, the way I think about my rights or the Constitution. I don't know, I haven't looked into that, but I suspect it is. She goes on, my relation with my thinking mind must change. I have to see its conditioning and lose all illusion of its capacity to perceive directly what is beyond its functioning. Truth simply cannot be thought. Read that again. Truth simply cannot be thought. I need to see that my thought is held back by the stubbornness of an idea or the attachment to a form. From the very moment I see this, the mind is freed from the idea or form, and a new perception can take place. To have a direct perception would mean to discover something entirely new, something unknown that my mind can never bring. When I originally read that passage, what came to mind is an experience I had of seeing something, I'll say seeing, but it was hearing something entirely new that I had seen hundreds and thousands of times. And it was the experience of someone had said my name aloud at some point, and maybe you've had this experience. And it sounded like they were saying Albert or Duchamp. It was as if I never heard the word Derek before, and it sounded very like a foreign word. And I think, to me, this is what's happening, where we hear something, we don't really hear it. We see something, we don't really hear it. Something happens. I probably did not really hear what was being discussed, partly because I was putting up a shield that was created by conditioning. He goes on, why is it that my mind never discovers anything new? I am a prisoner of all the impressions deposited in me. I am conditioned by the reservoir of my memory, the result engraved in me of the influences that have touched me. It is all that I have to answer with in my life. Little by little, I unconsciously accept the state of conditioning, and the energy of my mind deteriorates. She goes on, same chapter called Free Thought. In order to be present, I must understand the working of my thinking mind, that its function is to situate and explain, but not to experience. Thought is made up of accumulated knowledge in the form of images and associations, and seizes an experience only to make it fit into the categories of the known. Although it can entertain the new when it's quiet, thinking immediately transforms it into something old with an image that has already been the object of an experience. The image awakens an immediate reaction. This always repeats so that there's never anything new. Now at this point, I started thinking more about what happens when I encounter something that I've seen many times. My walk to work, my own kitchen, the view out my window, or things like that, or you all. And what came to mind is this kid's toy called a Viewmaster. And I don't know if you've ever seen one, but I brought it today. In case you don't know it. But I don't know if you ever have you all seen this before?
Come on, who did you see?
Yeah. But it basically just has 6 slides. It goes in, and you look through it, and there's slides, and these are all the slides, and it just keeps going around in circles. At any rate, I started thinking about this, and I thought, is this how my mind is working? I see Mark every time I see him, and I've already seen you before, so I don't really work at seeing you now. The slide goes on. It's like I have enough information, and this happens. Or I'm in my kitchen and I'm looking, at my stove, and I don't really look at it. It's just the Viewmaster moves, and or some idea at work comes up at the place of employment, and the Viewmaster clicks into place. I'm not really experiencing things, so I don't know. It helps me to think in images. So this idea of the Viewmaster was kind of with me a little bit the rest of the way. And so now we're back to metaphysical lecture, which I think is a couple passages that shed a little more light on this. Ruminating the past, sniffing the garbage cans of an unconscious existence. And then this one a little more literal, but metaphorical nonetheless. Both the eye and the ear see and hear selectively, bringing to mind the cinematic director who places limits on what he chooses his camera to see. The person we just spoke of, as well as our director, create a highly personal perspective. The director will define and redefine his scene, What he puts on film and what he leaves out becomes his artistic choices. What the audience finally sees in the cinema are his final selections, and there's every possibility that he may eventually wish he had done the scene differently. Similarly, the person musing over their childhood home may see it in a different light and decide that they are actually glad they were sent off to school. But no loss. But tomorrow there's a good chance that they'll be missing their childhood home again. In this manner, on a moment-to-moment basis, we construct our world and how we interpret it. In actuality, the objects and situations are relatively constant and remain intrinsically devoid of our interpretation. Beauty and love exist in the eye of the beholder. So the Sistine Chapel does not depend on either you or I to make it what it is. So there, I believe what Mr. Gill is adding to my previous thoughts are, not only is an image coming up, but even when a new image comes up, we're putting our preconceived, conditioned attitudes about what it should be. So if a new person walks in, I have an idea of what a new person walking in is going to look like, and perhaps I'm not really seeing that person. Or if a new thing comes up at my place of employment, say, I have an idea of what that problem should be, and I'm not really looking at just that specific problem itself. I'm putting some sort of another filter on the camera, so to speak. Again, back to this Sullivan. She says, I need to see that my thought is almost never directed on knowing myself as I am in the moment. And again, in this moment, it is difficult for the thought to remain on what is, because it is based on memory and it is constantly visualizing the possibility of becoming. How to resist the desire to become in favor of simply what is? It is difficult for my thought to stay in front of the unknown. This means abandoning my belief in everything it knows, even the trace of the preceding moment. Let me say that again. This means abandoning belief in everything it knows, even the trace of the preceding moment. And that, for some reason, I guess the director, talking about film, director, the viewmaster, and this idea of forgetting the previous moment made me think of the movie Memento. And I don't know if you've all seen this movie, Memento. It's written and directed by a man named Christopher Nolan, and the main character has no short-term memory. So he lives moment to moment. He has to tattoo himself to remember, take Polaroids to remember. Anyway, I think it's worthwhile to read just one short scene from that movie. The person with that affliction, which he's going to call a condition, his name is Leonard, and this person named Bert is the hotel manager where he's staying. Bert, you said you like to look people in the eye when you talk to them. Don't you remember? Leonard, that's the thing. I have this condition. Bert, condition? Leonard, I have no memory. Bert, amnesia? Leonard, no. It's different. I have no short-term memory. I know who I am and all about myself. But since my injury, I can't make any new memories. Everything fades. If I talk too long, I'll forget how we started. I don't know if we've ever met before, and the next time I see you, I won't remember this conversation. So if I seem strange or rude, that's probably... He notices that Bert's staring at him as if he were an exotic insect. Leonard, I've told you this before, haven't I? Bert, I don't mean to mess with you. It's just so weird. You don't remember me at all, and we talked a bunch of times. Leonard shrugs. Bert, what's the last thing you remember? Leonard looks through Bert, thinking. Leonard, my wife. Bert, what's it like? Leonard, like waking, like you always just woke up. So that also made me think of another famous quote by the artist Picasso, who was famously said, "If I can only rip out my mind and see with my eyes." So then that led me, I was remembering a interview I came across with a man named Tony Hiss, who had worked with Gil. He's a worker alongside Gil, and He's a writer. He's a New Yorker staff writer, reformer, and as Gil pointed out, back in the day, he was a bartender at the 72nd Street Saloon.
All-Star Cafe.
All-Star Cafe. So this is from this is on a similar subject to what we were just talking about. This is from his interview about 6 months ago. He had written a book called In Motion, The Experience of Travel, in which he presents an idea. It's called deep travel, which I believe he's basically using deep travel for a replacement for sensing, really deep state of sensing. The interviewer asked him, "Can you explain the basic idea behind deep travel?" Yes. Deep travel is an exhilarating state of mind that travel can evoke, when everything seems suddenly fresh, vivid, intensely interesting, and memorable, because you focus on what you're looking at and listening to. Deep travel is like waking up while already awake. Things have a way of seeming emphasized and underlined. Okay. I'm sure you all had that exact experience. And then he later goes on to say that we can not only automatically get this when we travel and see something new and don't have this filter of conditioning with us, but we can actually do this at will. We can sense at will and experience this all the time. And so, interviewer asks, so deep travel can work in a familiar setting, say like my kitchen or my walk to work. No place, however well we know it, this is his, stays exactly the same from day to day, or even from hour to hour. There are always different combinations of people present, or different plays of light and shadow. And again, I was thinking about this almost the exact same thing with the Viewmaster and how I don't see things, but yet it's always different. No matter if it's a static object, something has changed. He goes on. The most famous examples of this are the more than 30 canvases Monet painted of the facade of Rouen Cathedral in the 1890s. Same church, even the same viewpoints. He'd rented a room across the street, but each one astonishingly different. Sometimes the church looks brooding, ancient, gray-brown, cavernous, almost collapsing on itself. Other times it looks robust, sparkling, brand new, almost too brightly white to look at head-on. So he goes on, but no, I'll read. Actually, it's interesting. In a well-known place, it's also a matter of remembering, at least for the moment, how much more we could find out about things we've seen and used 1,000 times before, such as, for instance, the sidewalk. What is it that makes us feel safe and even looked after? Simply because we're walking along a narrow ribbon of concrete wall, turned sideways and laid horizontally across the ground. How different would the street feel? How would it sound if the sidewalk were instead a dirt path or cobblestones? So, thinking more about this, I was during those moments of sitting at my table in my kitchen, trying to remember that this room is completely different, and to really see it for what it is in that moment. And it's a struggle. It was not easy, and I didn't do it often. And I kept also practicing the slow walk and tried to see things, and as I'm sure you've seen, you notice things that you've never seen before, and you probably walk past them thousands of times. So it's a little bit about the thinking, and then as the Salzman also pointed out, we're conditioned in our emotions as well. And so found a couple very good passages about what happens to the emotions when they're conditioned by Maurice Nicole in his commentary. I'll read them. 2 short paragraphs. The emotional center is not born with a negative part. It should not be there, but it is acquired by the influence of people who are negative. By contact with adults, the child learns to pity itself, to feel grievances, to speak crossly, to dwell on its misfortune, to be melancholy, moody, irritable, suspicious, jealous, to hurt others, etc. This dreadful infection of a child is something against which nothing can be done, because it is not clearly recognized. This infection forms a negative part in the emotional center, and this infection is handed down from generation to generation. Another passage. Negative emotions arise, but if we're conscious of them, we can control our expression of them with concerted effort, which I'm sure you all know. The next step, and I thought this is interesting that he says it's the next step, is to discover the reason for or the source of negative emotions. Once we begin to practice self-observation, we can see that many of our negative feelings come from habitual reactions to situations that are unflattering to our self-love. Others come because of conditioned fear of situations. Once we learn to curb our self-love and become aware of our conditioning, we will cease to feel negative so much of the time. So again, there's kind of two things I was thinking about in my personal thoughts on conditioning there. One, I looked more at that Iron Man example that I presented earlier, and then I said that I want to be the one to be pointed out and be special, and I started thinking about all the times that this happened. One place is here. Chair could be talking, and he could be saying in his speech, and as this man and I began to reference a man and not say the person's name, that we had a discussion, and immediately what will pop up, as if I start salivating over the bell, is I hope he says me. I hope he points to Derek. I don't even know what I said, but I hope it's me, and I hope it's me that said something smart. It happens probably once, at least one time, if not more, every one of these meetings. It happens in our one-on-one meetings. It happens in group meetings. It happens at my place of work. It happens with my wife. It happens with my friends. It happens a lot. I'm sure it happens more than I know. So I never really looked at it as maybe this is a product of my conditioning. I was told to, being special and getting the care is a very good thing, and you should seek it at all times. And I do, and I think it blocks me from seeing what's real. That's one example. Another example is I'm sure other folks might have similar experiences. Where I grew up, appearances are very important. Attractive people were given, I'll use the carrot again, and people who were not attractive were not singled out. I won't go into detail, but there was a few instances where I was younger and I was called ugly by men, women, probably adults. Ugly face, ugly body, X, Y, and Z. And I looked around me, and the people who were getting all the goodies, as the chair sometimes uses the word, the people that were attractive. So I thought more about this, and I think almost in a different way, I tried not to be the person who was called ugly. So I spent an inordinate amount of time in my life trying not to be ugly. Just physically not ugly, trying not to be ugly. Whatever I think of, whatever I'm conditioned to think ugly is. And so I started looking at this a little more, and I realized it happens a lot more than I think. It's not just kind of obvious things. I found that even I could be walking down the street with someone. It could be a man or a woman, and the thought will cross my mind again, like the bell and the saliva, that I want them to think that I'm attractive. I don't even know them, and I have this thought that comes up in my mind, and it happens incredibly fast. Almost the only way to, I think, stop it is not to even notice somebody walking past me. It happens not all the time, but I think a lot. So those are so I'm going to just go back to the Salzman on this idea of emotions and conditioning under chapter A New Feeling. If I wish to know what is, I have to realize that neither words nor the feelings that accompany them are perceptions of reality. The word is not the fact, the feeling is not the fact. They are both the reaction of my conditioning to impressions, to everything that impresses me. But I blindly trust my feelings. I never doubt them. I believe they express a pure vision and do not see that they really reflect implacable conditioning. Further, my attention must not weaken or deviate if I am to see their meaning, feelings, meaning, and the extent of their influence on my life. I need at the very moment to be able to open to the intelligence of silence, in which alone understanding could appear. I need at the very moment to be able to open to the intelligence of silence, in which alone understanding could appear. I think that's another phrase to remember, the intelligence of silence. I think that's very beautiful. Another one I probably could meditate on for years. And there's two more short. I need to experience what keeps my thoughts and my feeling in a certain sphere. The repeated contacts with an order of ideas to which the thought submits. I need to see the hypothesis of this hypnosis, of this contact. In order to aspire to other contacts, to other impressions, I become more sensitive to a finer energy belonging to a more rarefied level. More frequent contact with this energy brings new possibilities. Finally, I cannot avoid reacting, but for the reactions not to stop me, I must be able to go beyond that. I have to continue until I see that it is everything I know that keeps me from approaching the real, the unknown. I must feel all the conditioning of the known in order to be free from it. Then my search can begin. So that's a little bit on emotions, and then I started to think, well, conditioning seems all very negative. What I'm presenting, what I came across in a lot of the writings, conditioning is this is all things that harm us. But possibly can there be good, quote unquote, conditioning? And what I had been reading around this time, not a work-related text, but it was an article in the New York Times 5 years ago by a writer named David Foster Wallace, and it's about a tennis.